everyone, I'm Alex.
And I'm Ben.
And we are married with dragons.
Don't mind us, we're just having a casual laugh before we start.
Just a bit of a track and a funny.
Yeah, now before we get going too far tonight, I'm just noticing as well I really need to have a shave. My beard is getting a bit woolly and wild. Before we get started tonight, we are having a few technical difficulties with our internet at the moment.
Yes.
So if we freeze or drop out or just generally don't work, that's why.
Yes, it's not because we dislike you and stopped everything.
Yeah, just had enough midstream.
Yeah, no, we just got a little tech issues, which is normal in this household.
Running at like 8% at the moment, so that's good.
Anyway, to kick us off, this is episode 10.
Episode 10,
Yes.
yeah, flying by.
Yeah, and we got some pretty good news since there's some like D&D action happening this month.
Yeah, there's been a fair bit of D&D action happening this year just so far, so it's pretty exciting to hear some more stuff about that.
Yeah, definitely. And one of the most exciting parts is that Wizards of the Coast are bringing out 2 new books, and the first one is a new campaign book. So that new campaign book is called The Wild Beyond the Witchlight. How's that say?
Try saying that 10 times real fast.
the Wild Beyond the Witchlight. It's a little bit of a tongue twister if you want to try and say it really quickly. So that is the new campaign book that is coming out for Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition. And that is coming out on the 12th of September of this year. So that's only in 3 months?
They come up very quick. Yeah, what are we, June
time.
now? So July, August, September, yeah.
Yeah, so pretty much this campaign, there's not a lot of information about it yet, apart from that the campaign brings the whimsical Feywild to the 5th edition. So it's introducing more characters, more monsters.
I mean, a new campaign is always exciting when they release because... especially when you fall heavily into the hobby that is D&D like ourselves, many people play through all of the campaigns, even a couple of times.
Yeah.
So whenever there's some more campaign content released, that's always very, very exciting in the D&D community. And it does seem like a bit of a different theme. There's not... From what I can tell, obviously we don't have a huge amount of knowledge around the module itself as of yet, but from what I can tell, it seems to be a relatively unique sort of style of campaign as well.
I did hear that, I don't know if it's true, it's just what I've read, that one of the races in this book might be a fairy.
That would probably be in the second book.
In the second
source book?
Oh.
Campaign books generally,
Yeah.
have I mean, they are releasing a source book. When's that coming out?
That is coming out November 16th.
So you might have some more fairy-related playable stuff even from the source book, which would be pretty exciting as well. It seems to obviously be linked quite closely to the campaign module that's coming out.
Yeah, so the second book, which you're talking about, is called Strixhaven, Curriculum of Chaos.
I don't know, try saying that 10 times. These new titles coming out, they're really hitting you with the tongue twisters. But I'm, especially as a DM, certainly very excited for that one as well. I haven't, obviously delved too far into it as of yet. But anything that allows you to add a little bit of difference in flavour to your campaigns and the way you play the game is always, I think, a welcome feature to be added in. So, and it seems like it will certainly be like that.
Yeah, definitely. And this source book is also a crossover with Magic the Gathering. So that I've personally never played Magic the Gathering, so I'm not too sure what the differences are there.
I mean, it's just a different universe. Every time I start to think like, maybe I'll get into Magic the Gathering, someone who plays Magic the Gathering says, don't do it, it'll consume your life. And I thought, okay, that's a bit intense. Apparently it's obviously very, very popular, but this will be the third book that the Wizards of the Coast have released that actually coincide with the Magic the Gathering universe. So pretty cool, pretty interesting.
Very cool. Well, I'm just really excited that the fact I could make a character that's a fairy.
I thought you'd like that.
I'm going to be all over that. And of course, because we like to rave on about alternate covers, this book is also coming out with an alternate. Oh, sorry, I'm not sure if the source.
I'm not sure if Strixhaven is coming out with an alternate cover, but we know that the campaign book is.
Yeah, so The Wild Beyond the Witchlight is definitely coming out with a alternate cover. And it's also up for pre-order at the moment. So you can pre-order it online on Amazon, online, I think, on D&D Beyond.
Oh, yeah, all of you.
Book retailers, probably your local book retailer.
Game stores.
Game stores, yeah.
Get in quick while they're hot.
Definitely. And if you do want to find out more, D&D is also having a presentation live, which is presented by G4. So that's going to be on July 16th and 17th, and that's when they'll start revealing a little bit more about these books and what the campaign might be specifically about, and going through with a bit more detail.
I feel like they're certainly going to reveal probably a bit more around the source book as well.
Yeah.
Around, because that's probably going to contain a lot more, especially for the players. Because obviously they don't want to reveal too much about the campaign itself, because obviously spoilers. So, when you want to play through it, you want to have a bit of it. But they will be releasing a bit more info about both of those, which will be very, very exciting.
Yeah.
So I'll certainly be tuning into that.
Yeah, definitely. It's going to be very, very exciting. I'm very keen. I'm down for
You're down for more D&D.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's our D&D news for the moment.
Yeah.
Seems to just be more and more popping out lately, which is exciting.
There was a bit of a, not exactly a dry patch, but I think before Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft, did I get that correct?
You did?
Yeah. No, they come out with a real lengthy names. It was a little bit quiet with the D&D space.
Yes and no, but they're certainly releasing more source books and whatnot now, definitely more frequently. But I think that is something that the Wizards of the Coast have come out and said that they were planning on doing as well. So it's not exactly a massive surprise, but it's certainly very exciting nonetheless.
Yes.
But yeah, let's move into our story for tonight's episode. You mentioned this story actually, and just the way that players come up with things on the fly that certainly seem to stick around.
So we're playing in the campaign Curse of Strahd, and we had a group where we're travelling into a town. I can't quite remember the specific reason why we're going into town. I don't know if we're passing through.
We were going in for a quest.
We're going in for a quest, okay.
Trying to gather something.
Yeah. So, obviously we need to get past the gate, and they wanted to know where we're from, and, we're trying to be secretive. I
didn't even know why we were trying to be secretive. Like, I was a player in this as well.
Yeah.
And thinking back, I'm not 100% sure why we thought we couldn't just be honest. Like, it's not like we were doing anything wrong to the town. Like,
maybe I think we were just a bit untrusting.
Maybe.
Well, Kraken under pressure. We had to give ourselves...
We were thriving under pressure.
We have to give ourselves a name for our group.
A reason for being there.
And we came up with just the silliest reason of we are the merchants from the Blue Mountains.
Yeah, this isn't a place that's like already in, the
landscape.
It's a place in Australia, but I can remember, the guard shooting down, what's your business here? And we said, we're humble merchants from the Blue Mountains. But the best part of, I don't know why.
I don't think we rolled well.
Again, we rolled terribly. And I don't know why we were trying to put this story along, but it was very obvious, very, very obvious. The guards and everyone involved did not buy it a single bit. They were in no way convinced, no way believing that we were merchants from the Blue Mountains. But for some reason, we stuck with it.
We did.
We just did not deviate from our story. Even though they were very obviously not believing us, we were like, oh, well, that'll be handy for us to sell when we move it. We just stuck with our story for some reason. And not only there, we kept it for a lot. We went into other cities and towns and stuff, and it's like, oh yeah, we're the merchants from the Blue Mountains.
And we even though no one believed us, we still kept pushing.
That was the story. That was the story we were peddling. I don't know. I honestly don't know why we even went down the track of deceit. But it certainly showcases, memorable things that can come about from players' improv, even when you don't really realise it at the time. I certainly didn't think at the time when, I can't remember who it was, one of the players said that, we were merchants from the Blue Mountains. I certainly didn't think at that time, oh, this is going to be a big moment in the campaign.
Well, maybe we thought we were safe with merchants because...
But why were we lying? I just don't know why we were lying in the first place.
Because
we have trust issues.
We were mysterious.
We were mysterious. But we were literally there trying to help out everyone in the land anyway.
True.
Our player brains just made it much more complicated than it needed to be.
Which we always do.
As most players do, I think, in D&D. Yeah, certainly was one of those stories that pulled through for the rest of the campaign.
Yes.
As well. Much like you calling us the Waynes.
Yes, the Waynes.
Oh dear. But yeah, I love stuff that... Just throw stuff away. I love stuff that players do that really stick around for a long time,
Yeah.
because they're what really give that stamp of uniqueness on the campaign that you're playing as well, and gives that sense of connection and stuff. So
Yeah.
I certainly thought it was pretty funny.
But yeah, I think I just love improv stories. I just think the best things come out of improv.
Oh, for sure. The most memorable moments is when you say something and you look back on it and you think,
Why did I say that?
why did that happen?
Yeah. Oh, so silly.
That's the essence of D&D.
Yes.
So, what do you reckon? Should we get into our main topic for this evening?
So what we're going to talk about tonight is pretty much fatigue. Now it seems like it's going to be very straightforward, but
I'm tired already.
Yeah. But fatigue, shows in different ways in D&D.
And we're not talking about, to clarify as well, we're not talking about fatigue as like an in-game mechanic.
No.
Or anything like that happens to your characters. We're talking about fatigue in the real sense of you as a person playing the game. Fatigue from maybe playing a long session or playing a long campaign or
playing
just being tired on the day.
Yeah, or maybe you're in the campaign and something's drawn out for a bit too long, and you need something new to just get the cogs in your brain working.
Yeah, and it hits everyone differently.
Yes.
For example, as a player, when you're when do you find? Well, I suppose before we go too far, two-part question. First of all, what is your ideal length / max length of a session of D&D you think you could play?
Okay, so I guess this really comes down to the start time. Because I'm a sleepy soul. Once it hits night time, I'm ready to get a hot cup of coffee or hot chocolate, watch a movie,
nice.
fall asleep on the couch, and that's at 7 o'clock. I'm a nana. So I think my perfect length of a session is probably between 6 to 8 hours. So if it's 6 hours and we started at 12 and went through till 6, 12 in the afternoon, I'm saying, not 12 at midnight.
Start at midnight, play till 6 in the morning.
Yeah. So I feel as though if you play majority of the day, that's when I'm going to be more awake. But once it starts to get, gets darker outside, if it's cooler months and it starts to get a bit cold, that's when the fatigue or feeling a bit tired, that will hit me like a ton of bricks.
See, I'm a little bit, and I've got to say as well, 6 to 8 hours is a good session length. I feel and something I found when I was doing a bit of research about this on the internet, asking Twitter, stuff like that, was that a lot of people were saying sort of 3 to 4 hours was their ideal length, or even their max length. And me being a big D&D nerd, I could play D&D forever. So reading that, I thought, oh wow, that's interesting. It's shorter than I thought it would be.
But if you say, I can understand if 3 to 4 hours, if they're playing at 6 or 7 o'clock at night, then going on.
See, the night time never really bothered me. Obviously, if you're getting into the AMs, obviously you get a bit more fatigued. But the night time never really bothered me. It was more about, if the session's good, I'm going to be enjoying it and want to keep playing. But I did find it interesting. Not that, depending on how frequently you play. For example, the campaign we're playing at the moment, I've sort of put to my players, because I want to try and we've been doing a really good job of playing weekly at the moment, which is fantastic. We're sort of splitting it up and doing big sort of 6 to 8 hour sessions on week A, for example, and then doing shorter, 4 hour sessions, maybe 3 to 4 hour sessions on week B, and alternating it so that people aren't trying to combat player fatigue, so that people aren't getting fatigued by playing a lot of D&D. And
see, I think if we did an 8 hour session, I'd want the majority of that session set during the day. So if we started late morning before lunchtime and kept going, that would be fine with me. But I think I struggle with tiredness when it comes to nighttime. But I feel as though I think the best length of a session is ideally probably 6 hours.
Now, I suppose that's fatigue in a very, very general sense, the fatigue of D&D. But I suppose D&D fatigue can be much more, more factors, contributing factors, I guess.
Yeah.
Can you? I know I certainly can. Can you identify points or things that might happen during a session that increase your D&D fatigue or your session fatigue?
Definitely. As a player, I think sometimes if drawn out combat can also be a trigger for fatigue, especially if you're kind of doing the same kind of attacks. If you're more of, when I was a barbarian, all I had to do was pretty much just just hit, run around, hit. There wasn't a lot of, from what I can do, a lot of creativity. I mean, if I probably thought more creatively, I probably could. But for a hack and slash character, I think, yeah, a very drawn out combat where it feels like nothing really exciting is happening or much progress is happening. You can feel a bit fatigued with that. And I also think maybe if you're in a dungeon or you're doing a quest and say another part of the party has taken it over and you don't feel like you're having much input, and you're observing. When you observe too much, you can start to, your mind starts to wander. You start to get distracted.
You don't feel engaged
with
what's going on.
And that can also make you feel tired. So I think they're the main ones for me.
And I think that there's certainly a few things that you can do to combat that sort of stuff as a player as well. So for example, and I mean this in the most loving sense, but I must say when you said I was a barbarian, so combat was pretty, it made me cringe a little bit. I'm like, yes, you're a bit more straightforward than some of the spellcasters, but you can still be creative. You can still got to look at what your allies are doing, what the enemies are you can still, it's not always straightforward. But yeah, some ways to try and combat. And I think combat is, as in encounters in the sessions are certainly probably the main instigator of having people turn off and having people get a bit fatigued. I think the sessions that are really combat heavy feel long.
Yes.
Whereas the sessions that are probably more role play based and investigation and mystery sort of based, the time flies by, I think, a little bit quicker. And that's because with the role play heavier sessions, everyone is sort of always involved. Whereas, as you said, with combat, it's obviously turn-based. Otherwise, can you imagine if it wasn't turn-based? Everyone shouting at the one time. So because it's turn-based, obviously you're not always doing something or engaged as such. Best way to combat that is certainly to, as I said, be thinking about what's happening in the combat. Look at what your allies are doing. Look at what they're trying to accomplish and think okay, I can see that they're trying to flank the enemies from this side. Perhaps I can assist them by going, trying to...
Do some strategic thinking.
Yeah,
just to
think
keep
about...
your mind busy.
Yeah, look at what's happening. Don't just wait till your turn and analyse the battlefield. Look at what's happening throughout the battle. Look at what your allies are doing in particular. Because I noticed that one thing that really great D&D players do is they pick up on what the allies are trying to do and they complement that rather than just trying to do their own thing all the time. But not only that, especially if you're something like a spellcaster, making sure that you're thinking about your spells that you might want to use in your turn, staying engaged in between your combat turns, that's going to help lessen the fatigue that you're getting throughout the session. Because when you sit back and you're not doing anything in combat and you're sort of switching off a little bit, that's when you start to slow down. That's when you might have a bit of a yawn, get a bit tired. Whereas if you're constantly thinking and looking at it, you're remaining engaged, so that fatigue isn't having a chance to set in. Yeah. Does that make sense?
That does make sense.
Yeah. I think that's probably the best way I could recommend to try and combat that.
Now, how would you go with? So, I don't know if this has happened to me, but just say your character's not in an area where another two characters are, and those other two characters are role playing. And they're role playing for what seems to be quite a long time. How would you stay engaged?
Honestly, there's a sort of two-pronged part to it. There's the player's part to it and the DM's part to it. Yeah. I'll start with the DM's part. The DM's part to it is basically if there's a split party, which is what you're referring to. So a split party in D&D means that some of the players are in area A, some of the players are in area B, and so they're in two separate areas, which means that you sort of have to take it in turns. Yeah, and because your players, your characters wouldn't know what's going on. Yeah. So basically, there's a couple things from the DM's perspective. It's really important to make sure that you are alternating between the two groups. If there is a split party, alternating between the two groups frequently enough so that you don't want to sit with one group for half an hour and then go to the other group for half an hour. Yeah. Much better to try and see what the one group's trying to achieve, give them a bit of a role play or a chance to make a few rolls, 5 minutes max, then switch to the next group. And then do the same sort of thing until each group is sort of resolving what they want to do. But doing it in 5-minute intervals is really good because one, you're only going, 5 minutes isn't very long to have no input in what's going on. So you're keeping them engaged well enough. But also Two, the group that isn't, engaged or role playing, whatever, like it's not their turn. 5 minutes is a really manageable amount of time to be interested in what the other party, the other group is doing as well, and remain engaged with the story that way. So I think that sort of obviously falls onto the dungeon master. From a player's perspective, though, the biggest thing comes down to remaining interested and honestly wanting to know what happens in the story, and remaining interested in, as I sort of mentioned with the combat stuff, the other players' goals and their thought processes. And even though your actual character wouldn't know what they're doing if they're off in another room, you as a person outside the game can still have fun and appreciate what's going on and think, oh yeah, they're thinking about it this way, or they're going about it this way, and sort of like listening to a D&D podcast for a couple minutes almost, you know what I mean? Being interested enough in the story to want to see what your teammates do next as well. But I think, and split parties is another massive topic that we can probably cover in another episode, but split parties, there is always going to be a little bit of difficulty with that. Because there's nothing wrong with doing it sometimes, but it's certainly not ideal, because you're always going to have it being taken in turns. It's hard not to metagame with split parties. It gets a little bit messier. But that's probably how I would best combat the split party fatigue, I guess, is try not do it too much.
That's a good way to do it too, because I feel as though if I'm listening, that's all good and well, but if you're kind of just waiting around for your turn, you're going to start to get...
Especially if it's a fairly big chunk of time. I think that's when... And I think that's the mistake a lot of DMs use, is they'll be like, right, 20 minutes... We're seeing what this script's doing for 20 minutes, and then we'll change. And it's too long in between each switch. But I guess another thing that the players can keep in mind as well, and obviously, as I said, there's nothing wrong with splitting the party as such, but bear in mind, as a player playing the game, if you constantly bring up to the D&D, I want to split the party, or I'm going to go off this way, and then you notice that you're getting D&D fatigue, you're getting bored, you're getting tired, trying to wait for your turn in the split party, maybe don't recommend it as often. You know what I mean? Like, a good DM will let you try and do what you want to do, but if you know that when you split the party, all of a sudden you get tired and you get bored and you don't enjoy what's going on, don't split the party so much. You know what I mean? Figure out what you enjoy doing as a player as well, and obviously you can still play to how your character would act, but remember as well that at the end of the day, it's about fun.
Yeah, exactly.
And you want to make sure that you're engaging in a way that's fun to you.
Yeah, and if you are playing those long sessions and you do start to get a bit tired, let your DM know if you want to have just a good 5-minute break. You want to have a stretch, because sitting down for a long time, you do start to feel a bit complacent, and just you need to move around, just to perk up a bit, have some water, make sure you're drinking water during the sessions, and I reckon having mini breaks, especially if you're
not too many breaks,
but if you're starting to try and get used to long sessions.
See, as a DM, I'm certainly a big fan of keeping breaks very short and very infrequent. Like if we're doing like a big 8-hour session, I don't mind stopping for half an hour to have some pizza or something. That's cool. But I'm certainly not one of the people that likes to do 15-minute breaks every 2 hours, because the issue with that is people fall out of the story. They fall out of role play. You've got to try and when you finish your break, come back to and sort of get everything moving a little bit again. Whereas if you do 1-5-10 minute break every 3 or 4 hours, then you're not losing your momentum as such. And people will be engrossed in the game rather than looking at the time or seeing what else is going on as well. I think one other thing as well to mention is obviously that we've spoken a little bit about player fatigue. How to combat DM fatigue? Because I know...
I don't really know much about that, so you'll have to tell me.
I certainly at the end of especially a big session feel very knackered, very tired.
Well, you're constantly talking, so that's a lot of energy.
Not even necessarily constantly talking, because there's certainly big sections where you guys, and these are my favourite bits, I get to sit back and do nothing and watch you guys role play amongst yourselves, watch you guys brainstorm, talk to each other in character, and I basically just get to sit back and watch, and it's fantastic. And that as a DM is great for me, because it helps actually combat the fatigue that I've got, because it gives me a break, gives me a chance to have a drink, have a bit of a recharge, which is fantastic. I find that the times I'm getting tired the most is when I'm having a massively long combat, because as a player, you've got to keep track of your character and watch what's going on. As the dungeon master, and even in the last session, we had a combat, and I think you guys were up against 18 separate enemies at one point. It was 16. It was a really high amount of enemies. So for me to keep track of just keep track of initiative, something as simple as that, for all of those enemies, plus you guys obviously, was quite draining on me. So I think that the best way to combat the DM fatigue is obviously, one, to be aware of when you are getting a bit fatigued, so that you can try and, stop it before it really hits you like a freight train. Two, to try and give your party the range. I feel like if you're getting really fatigued as a DM, it might be because you're driving a little bit too much.
Yeah. I can understand that.
Well, meaning that you're, as you said before, as a DM, you don't want to be talking all the time. You don't want to be constantly describing everything, or you don't want to be constantly speaking as an NPC. You want to let your players talk amongst each other, figure out situations, do things, give them the reins and give them a little bit of control as well. And I think that if you're doing that, you will get less fatigued. So if you feel like you are getting really fatigued, particularly in smaller sessions that you're the dungeon master for, perhaps think, am I giving my players enough of the reins of the session? Maybe I need to try and step back a little bit more and let them, do their thing a little bit. And 3, make sure that if you are running a session as a dungeon master and you are feeling really fatigued, try and end it at a point that before you get to that really fatigued point. Because I guarantee you, if you're really, really struggling and you're trying to push through to keep the session going, your players will notice that. Your players will notice you're feeling tired. You will go lax with your descriptions and your energy, and that will slow the whole game down.
Yeah.
You're much better off having like a 3 or 4 hour session, a shorter session with a lot of energy, rather than trying to, even if you're really keen, before the session starts, trying to push out the 6, 8, 10 hour session, but the DM's run out of steam.
Yes.
And that's sort of learning about your own fatigue as well, as you play the game.
You're learning pretty much your capacity.
Yeah. Like, for example, I know that I love playing for really, really long periods of time.
Yeah.
But last session, I think we played it for a total of maybe 6 to 7 hours last session we played. I originally was planning on playing more than that. But I wasn't looking at the clock or anything during the session. We sort of were getting to a point where I noticed that I wasn't like super tired or slow or bored or anything, but I noticed within me my energy had dropped a little bit, my descriptions were a little bit less intense. Like I noticed that little bit of a drop. So I thought, all right, I can feel myself coming down a little bit, I can feel myself getting a little bit tired. Let's end the session on a cliffhanger here. And I mean, 6-7 hours is still a great session length, even though it's not as long as I was planning on playing for that particular session. I think that was a better outcome than me trying to push through that and run the session even longer.
I feel as though it's a really nice, like you said, to end a session on a cliffhanger instead of ending abruptly or ending at a like halfway through a role play.
You just can't deal with it anymore.
Yeah, something that doesn't make sense to end it, or ending at a spot where it could easily be forgotten. You go to the next session like, what were we doing? I can't remember. Where did we pick up from where we left off? Because it did not make sense. So I think it's great to really try and find that sweet spot on when to end a session too.
But at the end of the day, I think it's something, and a lot of this sort of stuff, I think communication is the biggest thing I can say for majority of the time. Because at the end of the day, if you are really struggling in a session and you're like, oh look, I don't think I can play anymore, I've had a really big week or something, I'm really tired, let your players and your DM know, or if you're the DM, let your players know, or whatever, and be like, alright, we'll just play a bit shorter this week, or even if we just have to miss this week and pick it up next week. At the end of the day, it's meant to be something that you're enjoying. It's a hobby, it's a game that you're meant to be really enjoying. And so if you are pushing yourself to that point where it's not fun anymore, it's almost like a chore because you've had that fatigue set in, give yourself a break. If you're not having fun, what's the point?
Exactly.
And I suppose the other big thing as well is there is no correct length for a session.
No.
If you play a session that's even as short as 2 hours, I don't think I've ever played one quite that short. No. But even if you play a session as short as 2 hours, if everyone involved had a great time, perfect. That's a perfect session. Or if you play for, I've heard of people playing for 12, 14 hours, mammoth sessions. If everyone has a great time the whole time, perfect, sweet. There's no correct length of a session to play for D&D. It's however long everyone enjoys themselves for.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think an important thing to know is fatigue is normal in D&D. So if you are starting to feel fatigued, communication, make sure you're aware of what you can take on. And
make sure you drink 50 energy drinks during don't do that. That's a terrible, terrible health advice. Do not drink all the energy drinks. Water will be your best friend. Staying hydrated, and also snacks. What is it? Doritos and Mountain Dew?
Yes. More like Yeah.
G Fuel and
some coffee and some fruit to
health conscious.
Give you the energy for the session,
those
the
mammoth
adventure.
sessions. Oh dear. Well, I think that covers about all of the fatigue stuff that we wanted to cover. It was something, I thought this was an interesting one that I was pretty keen to chat with you about because it was something that's not exactly a game mechanic. It's more something that certainly impacts the game in a really big way, but a little bit more, I don't know, a bit more player focused.
Yeah, it's like that. I feel like it's something that should be addressed. So
and something that people don't think about all the time either. Like, especially newer players, they think like, oh yeah, we'll play for an hour. You don't realise that generally when you play a session a day, it does go for 3 hours. Is a pretty standard session. So,
and I think it's something that should be addressed, especially if you're watching this and you're like, oh yeah, I actually do feel tired and I don't really know what to do about it. It's something that should be on Google.
That's why we're here.
Yes. This is why you have us.
Absolutely. Well, I think it's time
for the joke.
For the joke.
All right, go for it.
Are you ready?
Yeah.
This one's a bit of a longer one. Well, it's not. It's not a bit of a longer
one.
one.
I don't get fatigued over the joke.
There's always a theme. There's always a theme. Okay. Why did the gnome artificer now? Bit of quick premise.
Backstory.
An artificer is a class in Dungeons and Dragons that is focused around inventing things and science and building and tinkering with things. Anyway, why did the gnome artificer get embarrassed when his robotic crocodile didn't work?
Oh God. Why?
He had a reptile dysfunction.
Oh. That's a bit of a cheeky one.
It is a bit of a cheeky one. It's not rude.
No.
It's a bit of a cheeky. It's a bit cheeky. I'm a bit cheeky tonight.
That's very fun for me.
I thought that was good. A reptile dysfunction. I thought that was great.
That was fun.
Oh dear. Well, yeah. Thank you for everyone for tuning in tonight through our technical difficulties.
Yeah, I think it went smoothly, so just ignore that.
Who knows if we even recorded? We might be talking to ourselves this whole time. We'll find out, I guess.
But yeah, thank you so much for watching Married with Dragons. This was episode 10, and
we will be back next week.
Back next Thursday. 8
Same
PM.
time, same place.
Yes. If we're not running into technical difficulties, we'll be...
Touch wood, fingers crossed, we'll be fine.
We'll be live right on the dot.
Very professional of us.
Yes. Alright guys, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next week.
Catch you next time.
Okay, bye.